stood in front of the bathroom mirror that morning, staring at the woman looking back at me. The fine lines around my eyes seemed deeper than yesterday, gray strands in my hair catching the light, no matter how I brushed them. 38. I reminded myself, though, the reflection staring back looked closer to 45. A tired sigh escaped my lips just as a knock rattled the bathroom door. "Mom, are you going to be much longer? Claire needs the bathroom." Emma's impatient voice cut through the door. Quickly rinsing my mouth, I stepped out, and my eldest brushed past with her little sister in tow. "Thanks." Claire whispered softly, only because Emma had prompted her. I stepped aside, hiding the sting of frustration. Emma's words carried disdain more often these days, each one cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. At breakfast, I set down bowls of oatmeal. Liam, my quiet middle child, ate without complaint. Claire rubbed her eyes, but managed a sleepy smile. Emma wrinkled her nose. "Oatmeal again. You can't even get breakfast right. You look like an old woman, Mom. Mrs. Turner down the street is in her 40s and looks better than you ever did." Her words pierced sharper than knives. I bit back a response, but Liam spoke. "Stop being mean. Mom works hard. At least we have food." Emma scoffed, her tone dripping with contempt. "Grateful for this, for living like we're poor, for driving that junk car to school." I clenched my jaw and urged everyone to finish quickly. When we piled into the car, the December air bit at our cheeks. The engine groaned before sputtering alive, every sound a reminder of how fragile our lives were. Emma folded her arms, glaring at the window. Liam stayed close to the glass, silent but loyal. Claire hummed quietly, too young to understand the storm brewing between her sister and me. I focused on the road, blinking back tears that threatened to spill. The silence didn't last. Emma leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You embarrass me. You don't even try. It's like you gave up on life and dragged us down with you." "I hate it." My knuckles tightened on the steering wheel, heat rising in my chest. Liam snapped, telling her to quit, but Emma only threatened to walk. I pulled the car over, trembling. "Then get out. If you're so ashamed of me, walk yourself to school." For a heartbeat, she froze, then smirked. "Fine." She slammed the door and stalked away, leaving Claire in tears and Liam furious. I drove on hollow inside, guilt gnawing at me, even as pride refused to let me call her back. By the time I dropped the others off, my chest ached with dread. My shift at the hotel began in minutes, and there was no space to collapse. The hotel lobby greeted me with stale coffee and a manager who wasted no time scolding. "Cutting it close again, Nora. Complaints yesterday, wrong wake-up call, not smiling enough. If you can't keep up, plenty of women would take your place." I forced a smile, biting down the defense rising in my throat. For hours I moved through the motions, check-ins, phones, wake-up calls, while my thoughts spiraled around Emma. Her face twisted in anger, her words laced with contempt replayed over and over. By the time my shift ended, darkness had fallen. I drove home with a pit in my stomach, praying she'd be waiting in her room, sulking as always. But the apartment was too still. Only Liam sat at the table with homework, and Claire curled on the couch with her blanket. Emma's bed was untouched. Panic gripped me as I dialed her number. It rang, then went to voicemail. Again and again, no answer. Hours dragged by, my messages growing more desperate. "Emma, please come home. I'm sorry. Just come back." At 11, exhaustion crushed me. Claire asked through sleepy eyes if her sister was lost. I lied, gently telling her Emma was with a friend, but my chest told me otherwise. Locked in the bathroom, I finally broke sobs, shaking me as I clutched my phone. Then the screen lit up. A text from Emma. Relief surged until I read it. "I'm not coming back tonight. I don't want to live with you anymore. Stop calling me." The words blurred through my tears. A knock came at the door. "Mom, are you crying?" Liam's voice was small, hesitant. I opened the door to his worried eyes, and he wrapped his arms around me. "It's okay, Mom. We'll be okay." His fragile comfort held me together for the rest of that endless night. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed, though my body felt twice its age. Claire shuffled sleepily as I dressed her for school, and Liam moved quietly, watching me as though afraid I might shatter. Emma's bed remained cold and empty. After dropping them off, I went straight to the school office. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Reed, frowned. "Mrs. Lawson, I was going to call you. Emma hasn't been in class for 3 days. If it continues, we'll have to notify the district. Truancy laws are strict." Her words made my stomach twist. Intervention meant caseworkers, strangers, deciding if I was a fit mother. I stammered out that Emma had run away after an argument and I was trying to bring her home. Mrs. Reed's gaze softened but stayed firm. "You need to find her before this spirals." I left shaking, dialing every friend of Emma's I knew. Most ignored my calls. The few who answered claimed they hadn't seen her. Finally, one whispered, "She's staying with someone, but she doesn't want you to know." The line went dead. I drove aimlessly through Scranton, eyes scanning sidewalks, my heart lurching at every teenager I passed, but none were her. That evening, Claire tugged my sleeve, asking if Emma had stopped loving us. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "She's just angry. She'll come back." Hours later, a message finally came. "I don't need you. I'm better off on my own. Stop trying to control me." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, desperate to respond, but no words seemed enough. The silence in the apartment pressed in until even breathing hurt. The weekend brought no relief. I drove across town to Martha's house, my late husband's mother, whom I cared for since her stroke. The house smelled faintly of antiseptic and dust. She lay confined to a bed in the downstairs den. Her once sharp tongue dulled, but not gone. "You're late," she muttered when I entered. I washed her hands, combed her thinning hair, and tried to ignore the bitterness in her voice. As I worked, memories clawed back the day I had married Mark, believing we'd conquer the world together. The nights we laughed in tiny apartments, the wonder of our children's births. Then the knock on my door years later, the officer's grim face, telling me Mark had died in a car crash, and the cruel revelation that he hadn't been alone. He had betrayed me long before the accident ended his life. I had lost him twice, once to infidelity, once to death. Martha's thin voice pierced my thoughts. He was his father's son. Restless, never satisfied. The words stung, but I stayed silent. Caring for her was meant to honor Mark's memory, but it only reminded me of all I had lost. I left her house that night, hollow, carrying a weight that refused to lift. Days blurred, shifts at the hotel, drop-offs, at school nights, at Martha's endless bills. Every hour was spoken for, yet nothing ever truly finished. The car groaned each morning, as if mocking me, until one day it refused to start. The mechanic's verdict was crushing $1,500 for repairs money I didn't have. I scraped together my tiny savings meant for emergencies, though every day already felt like one, and paid for a temporary fix. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my dwindling account. Liam wandered in, his eyes heavy. "You're always so tired, Mom. I wish I could help." My chest ached as I brushed his hair back. "You already do, sweetheart, just by being you." The storm outside grew heavier each day, snow piling high along the streets. But inside the apartment, the cold silence grew sharper. I stared at Emma's empty bed, wondering if she would ever come back. I prayed quietly each night, though my faith had worn thin. Then, one Thursday evening, the front door opened. Emma walked in as if she had never left chin-high defiance in her eyes. My heart leapt, though I forced myself to stay calm. "Nice of you to remember where we live," I said softly. She shrugged. "I needed a break. You were suffocating me." The words cut, but relief overpowered anger. Claire squealed and hugged her sister while Liam stayed wary, watching carefully. When I offered dinner, Emma rolled her eyes but surprised me by pulling food from the fridge. "You make the same boring meals. Let me try." Her chopping was clumsy, her cooking uneven, but Claire declared it the best meal ever. Even Liam smirked despite himself. For the first time in weeks, laughter flickered in our home. Later, as Emma scrolled her phone in bed, I lingered at the door. "I wanted to say thank you for coming home. I missed you. Please don't leave again." But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "Good night." Alone in the hallway, I pressed a hand to my chest. For the first time in months, hope stirred, fragile, faint, but alive. The morning of my interview at a downtown restaurant began beneath a gray sky heavy with snow. By afternoon, the storm turned fierce flakes, driving sideways winds biting through my coat. I should have canceled, but I couldn't. Our bills pressed too close, and this job promised better pay than the hotel. I kissed Liam and Claire goodbye and trudged into the blizzard, clutching my worn bag. As I rounded a corner, I spotted an elderly man struggling in the wind, dragging a small suitcase, his coat too thin. "Train station," he shouted when I asked where he was going. He'd never make it on foot. I hailed the only cab crawling by, pressed my last crumpled bills into the driver's hand, and helped him inside. The man protested, embarrassed, but I insisted. His eyes softened. "At least take this," he said, scribbling an address on a scrap of paper before the cab disappeared into the snow. I stood alone, my interview slipping away, my feet numb, yet warmth bloomed in my chest. For once, I'd done something good simply because I could. By the time I reached home that night, exhausted and empty-handed, the storm still raged. I should have felt defeated, but sitting with Claire curled against me and Liam reading quietly, a strange peace settled. I hadn't secured the job, but I had offered kindness, and that mattered more than I realized. Days later, I found the scrap of paper tucked in my coat, nearly forgotten, until a knock rattled our apartment door. When I opened it, the old man stood there, steadier now in a heavier coat. Beside him was someone who stole the air from my lungs, a man tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes I had once known too well. Eyes Emma had inherited. My heart lurched, years collapsing into a single breath. "Nora," he said, his voice lower, but achingly familiar. "Daniel." Emma stepped into the hallway, confusion etched across her face. "Mom, who is this?" My mouth went dry. For years, I had buried the truth. But here he was, standing in our doorway, and Emma's gaze demanded an answer. My voice trembled. "This is Daniel Hayes, your father." The word hung in the air, like thunder. Emma's face drained of color. "What? No, Dad was Mark. What are you talking about?" I reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "I never wanted you to find out like this," I whispered. "There are things I should have told you long ago." Daniel's father cleared his throat, his expression gentle but firm. "It's time, Nora. Let her hear it." My legs weakened as I sank into a chair. The story spilled out how Daniel and I had fallen in love when we were young, dreaming of a future together. How his mother despised me, called me unworthy, and forced me out of his life before he ever knew I was pregnant. How I had carried Emma alone, later marrying Mark, who raised her as his own. Daniel's fists clenched. "She told me you left, that you didn't love me. I never knew." Tears burned my eyes. I never stopped loving you. I had no choice. I had to protect Emma. Emma's face twisted in shock and rage. So you lied to me my whole life. You let me believe a stranger was my father? Her voice cracked, trembling between fury and hurt. I wanted to keep you safe, I pleaded. I thought the truth would only break you more. The silence was suffocating. Emma paced, arms wrapped tight around herself, a storm of disbelief swirling in her eyes. I braced for her to bolt to vanish into the night again. But Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady, low. Emma, I didn't know. If I had nothing, could have kept me away. I can't change the years we lost, but I can try to make it right if you'll let me. Her lips trembled as tears slid down her cheeks. She tried to mask it with anger. You expect me to believe that you'd have stayed? Yes, Daniel answered simply. Because I see you now, and I see her. What we had was stolen, but I won't walk away again. Emma's defenses cracked, and for the first time in years, I glimpsed the little girl who used to slip her hand into mine. Her voice broke. I don't know if I can forgive either of you, but I'm tired of being angry all the time. Slowly, she returned to the table, not looking at me yet, but not running either. That was enough for now. The days that followed unfolded like walking across thin ice. Daniel began visiting often, sometimes with his father, sometimes alone. He didn't overwhelm Emma with questions or demands. Instead, he showed up quietly, offering small conversations and letting her set the pace. At first, she bristled, her words sharp and her eyes cold. But slowly, cracks began to show. She asked him small things: where he lived, what he did for work, why he never came sooner. His answers were patient, never defensive. I didn't know, he repeated gently. But now that I do, I'm here. Bit by bit, the wall Emma had built around herself began to loosen, though she tried hard to hide it. At home, the sharp edges of our life softened almost imperceptibly. Emma still rolled her eyes, still threw out barbs, but the venom had dulled. Once I caught her helping Liam with his math homework. Her brow furrowed as she tried to explain the steps. He looked at her in surprise, but she shrugged, pretending not to care. Claire followed her around like a shadow, delighted to have her sister's attention again. One evening, as we cleared the dinner table together, Emma muttered under her breath, "Your cooking's not that bad." It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in her armor, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Daniel's presence in my world reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. Seeing him again, hearing his voice, stirred memories I had buried for decades, walking together after class, laughing as he brushed snow from my hair, the stolen kisses, the dreams we whispered about, building a life side by side. I had forced myself to forget those days, to convince myself they belonged to a girl who no longer existed. But now, with him sitting across my kitchen table, those dreams felt less like ghosts and more like possibilities I had been denied. It terrified me. It also gave me hope I hadn't felt in years. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Daniel lingered in the kitchen while I washed dishes. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for everything my mother did, for every year we lost." I kept my eyes on the soapy water, afraid that if I looked at him, my heart would betray me. "You didn't know," I said. "I can't blame you for that." But inside, I grieved for the years stolen, for the life that could have been. He reached across the counter, covering my hand with his. "We can't get those years back, but maybe we can make something of the ones ahead." My chest tightened. I didn't answer, but I didn't pull my hand away either. Emma's journey was slower. Some days, she slammed her bedroom door, furious at both of us. Other days, She lingered in the living room listening while Daniel told stories about his travels, trying not to show how much she cared. Once she asked him what her first word might have been if he had been there. He admitted he didn't know then, promised he wanted to hear every detail she'd share about her childhood. She looked away quickly, but I saw her lips twitch, fighting a smile. Healing wasn't linear. It lurched forward and back, but it was happening. That was enough to keep us all going. Meanwhile, the rest of life remained heavy. The hotel job wore me down, Martha's care, continued bills piled high. But with Daniel back in my life, I no longer felt entirely alone. When my car broke down again, he showed up without hesitation, tools in hand. When the heater rattled and sputtered, he crawled under the unit until it hummed back to life. He didn't promise to fix everything, but his presence reminded me that maybe for the first time in decades, I didn't have to hold the world on my shoulders alone. One night, as I tucked Claire into bed, she whispered, "Is he really my daddy too?" My heart ached at the innocence in her question. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "He's Emma's father. But he cares about you and Liam too." She smiled sleepily. "I don't mind. He tells funny stories." Watching her drift off, I realized the children were teaching me something I had forgotten. Acceptance didn't have to be perfect. It just had to begin. As winter melted into spring, I noticed the smallest shifts. Emma no longer refused to sit beside me at the table. Liam laughed more freely. Claire sang again as she colored at the kitchen counter. Daniel's steady presence stitched into our days, a reminder that even after years of lies and loss, new beginnings were possible. I didn't know what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long while, I believed it might hold more than survival. It might even hold joy. Spring carried with it a kind of quiet renewal I had almost forgotten existed. The snow retreated from the curbs, leaving behind wet streets and the faint scent of thawing earth. For once, I didn't dread the changing season. Each morning felt less like a battle and more like a possibility. Emma still struggled, her temper hadn't vanished, and her trust remained fragile. But there were moments when I caught her watching me with something softer in her eyes, as if she were beginning to see me not just as the enemy, but as a mother who had tried, however imperfectly, to protect her. Daniel's visits became part of our rhythm. Sometimes he joined us for dinner, bringing fresh bread from the bakery near his apartment. Other times he helped Liam with a science project or listened to Claire chatter about her dolls. He didn't force himself into the space. He simply offered his presence, and slowly it began to feel natural. Emma still kept her guard, often retreating to her room after a few minutes, but she no longer stormed out. Once, when Daniel said goodbye at the door, she whispered a barely audible good night. It was the smallest step, but to me it felt like a crack of sunlight breaking through clouds. For myself, I felt something I hadn't in years: partnership. When the hotel manager scolded me again for not smiling enough, Daniel was waiting afterward, walking me home through the dim streets, his quiet company making the sting of humiliation easier to bear. When Martha's care became overwhelming, he offered to drive me, staying in the car, so she wouldn't direct her sharp tongue at him, but close enough that I didn't feel alone. His presence didn't erase the burdens, but it reminded me that they no longer rested solely on my shoulders. Emma's walls began to crumble in unexpected ways. One Saturday, she asked if she could cook dinner again. She burned half the rice and oversalted the chicken, but laughter filled the kitchen as Liam teased her and Claire insisted it was still delicious. Emma rolled her eyes, but I saw the corners of her mouth curve upward. Another evening, I found her at the table sketching quietly. When I asked about it, she snapped, "It's nothing," but didn't shove the paper away. It was a drawing of our family rough lines, but unmistakable me, Liam, Claire, and herself. No father was drawn, but the fact that she had included herself at all made my throat tighten. Late one night, Emma lingered in the hallway as I folded laundry. Her voice was low, uncertain. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" About him, I set the clothes aside and met her gaze. "Because I was afraid I admitted." afraid of losing you, of making everything worse. I thought silence was safer. She looked down at her hands, then whispered, "It hurt more to think you didn't trust me." The truth of her words pierced me, and I reached out, gently touching her arm. "You're right. I should have trusted you. I'm sorry." For a long moment, she stood still, then finally leaned into me, just enough for my hand to rest on her shoulder. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the closest we had come to peace. As weeks turned to months, life began to feel different. Not perfect, never easy, but no longer a constant storm. Bills still piled up. Martha still needed care. The hotel still drained me. Yet at home, there was laughter, fragile but real. Daniel's steady presence reminded me that second chances existed even if they came decades late. Emma's slow softening gave me hope that healing was possible even for wounds carved deep. And in the quiet moments watching my children together, I realized something I had missed for years. Family wasn't defined by perfection or appearances. It was built in the choice to stay, to try again, to believe that broken things could still be mended. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Scranton, Daniel walked me to the stoop of our apartment. The air was warm, carrying the faint smell of spring flowers. He paused, his eyes searching mine. "We've lost so much time, Nora. But I don't want to lose what's left. Whatever you'll allow, I want to be part of it. Part of you, part of them." My heart tightened, fear and hope colliding. For years, I had carried everything alone. Now here was the chance to carry it together. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe in beginnings instead of endings. The road ahead was uncertain, full of challenges that hadn't disappeared. But as I watched Emma laugh softly with Liam and Claire the next morning, and saw Daniel waiting quietly at the edge of our lives with patience and steadiness, I understood that survival had given way to something greater: renewal. The chance, however fragile, to build again. So, if you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment to support more stories like this, because the greatest lesson I've learned is this: even when life steals everything you thought you could count on, it's never too late to reclaim love, dignity, and hope.